Fighting for the right to refuse chemotherapy.
Force a 17-year-old to undergo chemotherapy.
Loses her bid to refuse cancer treatment.
Ruled she must undergo chemotherapy.
They ripped my family apart. They ruined my daughter's life.
It's been really difficult not being able to actually speak for myself.
It says chemotherapy is poison, but the court ruled that as a legal minor, she could not refuse it.
There's no reason why she should have fought like she did. This is her decision. And I know that she's old enough, mature enough. If she wasn't, I'd be making that decision.
What decision would you make?
And if my decision would probably be the same, I don't believe in chemicals, I don't believe in toxins, I would find a treatment for her.
Today, we'll be discussing the case of Cassandra Callender. Cassandra was described as an intelligent girl with a bright personality and her whole life ahead of her. She was very close with her mom. She had a cat who she adored, and she had friends who she enjoyed spending time with. Her bond with her loved ones was especially why it was a struggle for her when just at 17 years old, she was diagnosed with cancer and subsequently left to spend almost half a year in the hospital undergoing chemotherapy. For 5 months, Cassandra stayed inside the Children's Hospital undergoing chemotherapy to treat the stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma that she had. But what was shocking about this treatment plan was that not only is treatment for this cancer typically done outpatient, but Cassandra did not want to do chemo at all. She wanted to look at different treatment methods, and she refused to do chemotherapy. It wasn't until the state decided that she wasn't mature enough to make that decision when she was subsequently taken out of her home to have a port inserted in her chest to undergo months of chemotherapy while having to stay inside the hospital. But what's even wilder about this case is that soon enough, Cassandra turned 18, and unfortunately, the cancer would come back. But unlike before, this time around, she was allowed to make her own decision on treatment. And what she would decide would soon cause a lot of controversy amongst those in the Western medicine and alternative medicine world. Because Cassandra would subsequently pass away, and many would begin pointing the finger on the reason all of this even happened. But just to introduce myself, my name is Petal Palmer, and on this channel, I post anything involving medical mysteries and crime. If that is something that sounds interesting to you, please consider subscribing if you end up liking this video. Alright, let's get into this case. Cassandra Callender was born on September 30th, 1997 to her mother Jacqueline, or Jackie Fortin, and father who was not involved in her upbringing after she turned 7, so will not be named. Cassandra grew up in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. Windsor Locks is a small town said to be relatively safe and is also where this case unfolds. Cassandra was very close with her mom, Jackie. It was said that they had so many holiday traditions together. Every year they would travel to New York City during Christmas, and one of Cassandra's favorite holidays was Thanksgiving because she especially loved her mom's cooking. She had a cat named Simba whom she loved dressing up for holidays, and it was said that she loved traveling, tattoos, and having bonfires with friends. It was also said she loved shopping, especially to buy girly things, and before she got ill, she loved working. In the 9th grade, during her freshman year of high school, Cassandra's mother pulled her from school and began homeschooling her. And it wasn't too long after, in May 2014, when a 16-year-old Cassandra began experiencing symptoms that quickly became problematic to her day-to-day life. At first, Cassandra noticed that she was having some lighter symptoms, as she was having stomach aches and lower back pain. But as July rolled around, these symptoms escalated to her having chest pain. In addition, she also began noticing a lump around her cervical gland that was enlarged and very tender. Originally, her regular physician, Dr. Heyman Penchel, prescribed her an antibiotic. When this didn't help, he passed her case along to an infectious disease specialist named Dr. Henry Feeder. Dr. Feeder had an appointment with Cassandra and her mother on July 1st, 2014. And at this appointment, he gave another treatment option. The treatment he did give her, by the way, was not noted in the documents. Later on, he followed up after the date to see if the new prescription had been helpful. However, he wasn't able to get Cassandra or Jackie into the office. After missing 2 different appointments, Cassandra and her mother attended an appointment in early August, which resulted in a chest x-ray being ordered. Soon enough, this x-ray showed Dr. Feeder that Cassandra's lymph nodes were enlarged in her chest, and he was immediately concerned because based on these results, He suspected that Cassandra might have cancer, and because of this, he soon scheduled another follow-up appointment for a needle biopsy of her cervical gland, which was still very enlarged. Now, despite being told that cancer was suspected, Cassandra and Jackie still ended up not attending this follow-up appointment as well. But fortunately, they did make it to a second appointment later in the month. And it was at this appointment where, to their surprise, the needle biopsy showed signs of potential lymphoma. Shortly after, Cassandra was then passed along to the Cancer and Blood Disorders Services Division of Hematology and Oncology at the Connecticut Children's Medical Center, or CCMC, in Hartford, Connecticut. Cassandra's first appointment at CCMC was scheduled for September 4th, 2014. However, for some reason, she and her mother did not show up, and so the appointment was then rescheduled 5 days later for the 9th. It was then when Cassandra was looked over by Dr. Eileen Gillen, and Dr. Gillen determined that Cassandra would need a second biopsy done of one of her cervical glands to better understand the situation, if whether it was cancerous or if it was benign. Just 3 days later, on September 12th, Dr. Brendan Campbell, a CCMC surgeon, performed the incisional biopsy on the still enlarged cervical gland. And surely enough, this biopsy resulted in a diagnosis: Hodgkin's lymphoma. Hodgkin's lymphoma is a cancer of the lymph tissues. Though it's highly fatal if left untreated, with timely treatment, most people with this type of cancer survive and recover. However, interruptions to the chemotherapy used to treat it could risk a bad outcome, which could typically then lead to the need for radiation therapy. A week after this biopsy, on September 19th, Dr. Gillen called Jackie and she spoke to her about the official diagnosis of lymphoma. Now, of course, with any doctor calling to inform anyone of a cancer diagnosis, I'm sure there's never an expectation of a positive response. However, the response that Dr. Gillen did receive was far worse than anything she expected. Dr. Gillen claimed that during this phone call, she was met with hostility, and she was accused of having a nonchalant attitude during the call, which upsetted Jackie. During this call, Dr. Gillen explained to Jackie that she recommended that Cassandra undergo more tests in order to determine what stage the cancer was and to begin figuring out a treatment plan. However, Jackie refused to discuss it further, and because of this, Dr. Gillen reached out to her partner, Dr. Michael Isakoff, to handle the case. Dr. Isakoff is a pediatric oncologist, and according to Dr. Gillen, he was better equipped to handle Jackie and the situation surrounding Cassandra. Eventually, Dr. Isakoff was able to schedule an appointment for October 7th, and this time, they were most definitely going to show up to the appointment. But to Dr. Isakoff's surprise, when he walked into the room, only Jackie and her brother, who was Cassandra's uncle, were in attendance. And to Jackie's surprise, it was Dr. Isakoff who walked in the room and not Dr. Gillen, and she was immediately upset with the doctors again, as she had expected to meet with Dr. Gillen and had not been given a heads up on the change. Now, during this meeting, Dr. Isakoff explained that Cassandra would need more tests in order to figure out how far the cancer had progressed and help figure out what treatments would work best. But the thing is, Jackie was not very open to the idea of chemotherapy, as she called the treatment poisons. Dr. Isakoff then explained that there were some toxic side effects involved, but that the treatment was their only option. He also noted that there were ways to reduce the overall toxicity of the treatment that they might be able to explore. Now, throughout the appointment and conversation, according to Dr. Isakoff, it was described that Jackie was angry and hostile. She was noted to have complained about several process issues and once again was upset about how the information was being told to her. Jackie then asked for a second opinion and even stated that she didn't believe that Cassandra actually had lymphoma, citing the lack of the Epstein-Barr virus on the biopsy, which is a disease that is sometimes seen linked with lymphoma. According to Jackie, she'd seen online that the two are always found together, and the lack of the virus made her suspicious. Despite being told multiple times that the virus was not always present, she was not understanding of that information and still insisted upon a second opinion. Before the appointment ended, Dr. Isakoff explained to Jackie that Cassandra's odds were best if she began treatments within the next 2 weeks, and Jackie and her brother then left the appointment. It would be days when Dr. Isakoff would not hear back from them, and he would soon reach out on October 17th, urging them to come into his office, not knowing that Jackie had already found Cassandra a new doctor. On October 14th, Jackie took Cassandra to Dr. Matthew Richardson. Dr. Richardson was an oncologist at Bay State Medical Center in Springfield, Massachusetts. He reviewed scans and the pathology reports from the biopsies done before, and Dr. Richardson too agreed with the diagnosis of Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, after confirming this information for them, Dr. Richardson attempted to call Jackie 7 times over the course of 2 separate days, but he was not able to get a hold of her. Finally, though, 6 days later on October 20th, Jackie actually returned Dr. Richardson's calls, and he explained to her that Cassandra urgently needed her cancer staging test completed so that treatment could begin, and he was worried about how much time had passed since the original diagnosis on September 19th, which had now been a full month prior. Now, during the call, Jackie mentioned that she wasn't sure if she wanted Dr. Richardson to be the one to treat Cassandra. But 2 days later, on October 22nd, she called Dr. Richardson again and agreed to have him treat Cassandra. And it was just the next day, on the 23rd, when Cassandra underwent a PET scan, or a position emission tomography scan, in order to have her cancer stage investigated. It was when the results came back when they discovered that the scan showed that Cassandra had stage 3 lymphoma in her neck, chest, and abdomen. Jackie was called the same day with that information when it came, but she did not pick up, and so a message was left for her, urging her to begin treatment. Again, Dr. Richardson reiterated that a lot of time had passed between the diagnosis and the beginning of treatment, and he was very worried about the standard of care of Cassandra. Between the 25th and 27th of October, Jackie was called by Dr. Richardson a total of 6 times, but he still received no answer. The silence would continue until October 30th, when Jackie would finally call Dr. Richardson back to inform him that she'd actually found a different doctor for Cassandra and requested that she receive her medical records. When asked where to send the records, Jackie stated that she would just come collect them herself. She also stated that she did not want to discuss the PET scan results and that Cassandra would not go through with further pre-treatment tests, even though several had been scheduled. Immediately, Dr. Richardson reached out to Dr. Isaacoff, and he was like, "Hey, I'm really worried about Cassandra and her well-being." And he told Dr. Isaacoff all about how Jackie was seeking to have a second biopsy done, which both doctors felt was unneeded and an unwarranted risk. And he wasn't the only doctor that was concerned, because unbeknownst to Jackie, Cassandra, or several of the other doctors at first, Dr. Feeder had actually called the Department of Children and Families, or DCF, to report this case. He reported Jackie's actions as a potential case of medical neglect of a child and requested that the matter be investigated formally. The report was filed formally on October 2nd, 2014, which was just in time for investigator Margaret Nardelli to keep tabs on the missed appointments in real time. On October 3rd, Nardelli reached out to Jackie to talk to her about the report and get a feel for the overall situation from the mother's point of view. Jackie, per what a lot of people had described as the norm, was extremely hostile and declined to meet with anyone from DCF. She stated that she was making sure that Cassandra's needs were met, and again said that she was seeking a second opinion. It wouldn't be until later in the month when Nardelli was finally able to get into contact with Jackie again. On October 21st, Nardelli had to physically leave a note at Jackie's home asking her to reach out, and unfortunately for Nardelli, Jackie did in fact reach out, calling that same day, but not with the news that she would have likely been hoping to hear. According to one of the official documents describing Jackie's reaction, it says, quote, "She was very upset and was yelling and swearing. The mother told Nardelli that she was not allowed to go to her home ever again, that Cassandra's needs were being met, and that she did not have to tell Nardelli anything or do anything that the department requested. The mother also told Nardelli that Cassandra felt fine and that she, the mother, did not think that Cassandra had cancer. The mother said that she did not care what the department did and hung up the phone." This call, as one might expect, did not go over well with DCF. Eventually, Jackie did have meetings with DCF later in the month, but it was too late to stop them from taking the case before a judge. Between Nardelli's experiences, the calls from the more recent doctors, and Jackie's continued denial of Cassandra's illness, DCF unfortunately had to step in. A petition was filed based on the discussed issues raised by DCF and the doctors that had been working with Cassandra's case. And it was just on October 31st when Judge Westbrook deemed that Cassandra was in fact in physical danger due to her lack of treatment and granted a temporary custody order. Following this order, Cassandra was immediately taken to an emergency room by DCF workers in order to have her evaluated. During the trip to the ER, Cassandra expressed that she was scared of staying at the hospital and was worried about waking up with tubes sticking out of her. She also shared that her mother didn't like doctors and was worried she would upset her. Cassandra was subsequently removed from her mother's house and was placed with her cousin, John David Anthony Reduccia, in his home. John was to keep an eye on Cassandra pending the preliminary hearing on the 6th of November. At that hearing, an evidentiary trial was scheduled on the 12th of November, and Cassandra was to remain with her cousin until then. At the trial, Nardelli, Dr. Feeder, Dr. Campbell, and Dr. Isaacoff testified with their experiences regarding Cassandra and her mother. Not only them, but Cassandra's cousin also testified, sharing with the court that Cassandra had mentioned the day before, on the 11th, that she would willingly undergo treatment as long as she was allowed to go home during it, and that she would refuse treatment if she was not allowed to return home. Though John acknowledged that it was not rational for Cassandra to reject treatments based only on whether she could go home or not. John also noted that it was to his understanding that one of the reasons Cassandra had taken so much time between diagnosis and treatment was because she was doing her own research and looking into her own options for treating it, stating that he thought it was best if Cassandra was allowed to return home, as he thought she would undergo treatment if she did. Cassandra herself also testified at the hearing. During her testimony, Cassandra shared that her loved ones did not want to lose her because of cancer, but that she knew chemotherapy was going to be hard. She then stated that she would in fact refuse treatment if she was not allowed to go home, just as her cousin had said before. She was quoted as saying, "If you let me go home today, I would start chemo tomorrow." Overall, Jackie's testimony was unconvincing to the court. She testified that she wanted a second opinion because it was her right to have one, especially for such a serious diagnosis. She stated she was upset when she learned Dr. Richardson and Dr. Isaacoff had spoken because, quote, she wanted a second opinion, not a second agreement. She also claimed she refused to continue contact with DCF at the time because she was doing what she needed to be doing. She then clarified that she did believe that Cassandra had cancer, but that second or even third opinions were her right as a parent. In regards to the relationship between Jackie and Cassandra, Dr. Feeder testified, and just a heads up, this was what he was saying in the court, so this is just what I'll be saying word for word. He said, "Cassandra has always been quiet and sweet, and she defers when I'm with her to her mother. So she never Basically, it was more her mother speaking for her. So I would ask Cassandra, meaning, how is she doing and this, that. And it was more through her mother. So Cassandra was always very courteous and nice to me. And I think Cassandra really relies on her mother to sort of take over for this problem in her neck." It's also notable that Cassandra testified that she and her mother had never missed a medical appointment. However, this was something that was easily disproved to the court via records from the various physicians. It's unclear whether or not Cassandra was aware that there were appointments missed, as it was possible that Jackie might have made them and missed them without telling her daughter. As requested on November 14th, Cassandra was fortunately placed back with her mother. However, this was going to be in place under the following conditions: that she was to receive chemotherapy, that DCF was allowed unrestricted access to Cassandra and the family home, that all medical and DCF appointments were to be kept and attended, that Dr. Isaacoff was to serve as her physician during her treatment, and that treatment was to begin within 72 hours of her return home. For the first 2 days of Cassandra's treatment, this arrangement seemed to work just fine. It was early on the 17th and 18th of November when Cassandra underwent chemotherapy at CCMC. Though she still didn't really want to, she made sure to keep the agreement. But the thing is, the veins in her arms were unfortunately not holding up well to the treatment, and this caused the doctors to take another step. She was told that due to to the bruising around the site where the chemo was being inserted, they were going to have to put a port-a-cath into her chest in order to continue chemo, as it wasn't safe to keep using her arms to do so. The thing is, Cassandra didn't want this at all because, as mentioned before, having tubes put into her was one of her fears of being in the hospital. But despite her reluctance, she was told that they had no choice but to do so, and the surgery to get this put in would in fact go ahead. However, doing this was made a bit harder for them because when DCF workers arrived around 4 a.m. on the following morning on the 19th, Cassandra was not at her mother's home. And when asked, Jackie stated that she didn't know where Cassandra was and had not yet looked for her. A search of the house and even the homes of some of Cassandra's friends took place, but she was not found. And soon enough, a silver alert or a missing person alert went out in the local area and on social media to attempt to find her. After several days of being missing, Cassandra reached out to her family's attorney and told them that she wanted to come home, and the attorney reached out to DCF to update them on this as well. On the 24th of November, 5 days after leaving, Cassandra returned home to her mother's house. The following day, on the 25th, DCF brought her to CCMC for a medical evaluation done by Dr. Isakov. Now, Nardelli and another DCF worker were also at this meeting or evaluation, and it was there where Cassandra stated that she would not be continuing chemotherapy. She noted that she didn't feel sick and that if she ever did, that she might come back for treatment, but that she didn't trust the doctors at CCMC. She also admitted to Dr. Isakov and the DCF workers that she never intended to truly start chemo, but knew that she needed to say that in order to go home, noting that she'd be 18 soon and wouldn't have to do the treatment then. On December 1st, a trial court motion was filed that called for the reconsideration of Cassandra's case due to recent events, and a trial date was selected for the 9th of November, which would take into account new evidence and recent incidents regarding Cassandra to determine if she was capable of making life or death decisions for herself. During this trial, Dr. Isakov stated that he felt that Cassandra was not capable of making her own medical decisions. He felt that even if she were an adult, her refusal to get the chemotherapy would cause him to question whether or not she was competent. Nowhere in the documents does it seem that this obvious bias towards treatment was challenged or noted. Though it is true that treatment was the best option in terms of her safety and overall health, it is still an issue of bodily autonomy. Dr. Isakov also noted that the interruption of her treatment was worsening her prognosis and putting her at higher risk of needing to undergo radiation therapy, which is a much more aggressive and side effect heavy treatment option. He would go on to state that he also didn't trust the competence of Jackie to monitor or attend to her daughter's health. He felt that Jackie's concerns about putting poisons into Cassandra's body were somewhat valid. However, he felt that the potential harm was far outweighed by the chance of saving her life. On the other side, Jackie testified that she believed that Cassandra had cancer, but also believed it was Cassandra's choice if she wanted to do the chemo or not. Jackie claimed that she'd asked Cassandra to do the chemo and wanted her to, but she still felt it was her daughter's right as a human being to be able to decide what went in or out of her body. Despite claiming that she wanted Cassandra to do the chemo, Jackie, when asked if she knew that Cassandra would die without treatment, said, "That's what they say, but there's no guarantee with the treatment of cancer." Ultimately, the court decided in the favor of DCF and the doctors, and Cassandra was to remain under the custody of DCF, with the department being listed as the primary decision makers for Cassandra's medical care moving forward. During the duration of the trial, Cassandra had remained in the pediatric ward of CCMC and was not allowed to leave. This was noted in the joint motion for the emergency exercise of the court's supervisory power over the trial court, filed by Jackie and Cassandra's legal team on the 17th of December. Essentially, Jackie and lawyers were filing to appeal the decision from the trial before and reclaim custody of Cassandra. Within this appeal, it was also noted that Cassandra's court-mandated chemotherapy was set to start the following day on the 18th, beginning with the implementation of a chemo port, which, as a reminder, is a procedure that Cassandra had directly been against against in the past. But regardless of the appeal, Cassandra's treatment did indeed begin the next day. And in early January 2015, a trial was held within the Connecticut State Supreme Court to determine if Jackie and Cassandra's rights had been violated by the two previous trials that took place in November and December of 2014. On January 8, 2015, the Supreme Court of the state of Connecticut released an official press release stating that the trials were fair and constitutional. The release also stated that Jackie and her legal team, quote, failed to meet their burden of proving under any standard that Cassandra was a mature minor and capable of acting independently concerning her life-threatening medical condition. The document also briefly outlined the previous trials, mentioning Cassandra's runaway incident and her going back on her word to receive treatment. In other words, the court released an official public document doxing a minor and sharing not only medical information, but also that she had ran away and was deemed incompetent. Many people were outraged by this. A lot of people were posting online, advocating for Cassandra's rights and rallying in person for her.
In spite of the snow, a small but boisterous group rallied Saturday outside what's been Cassandra C's home for the past month. Free Cassandra! While 145 people said they planned to show up, only half a dozen actually made it. Perhaps a chilling effect from the weather. But organizer Danny McAvoy wasn't deterred.
After the Supreme Court released their statement that the trials were constitutional, a page called Free Cassandra was started on Facebook to advocate for her rights of not wanting to be in the hospital doing chemo. As of January 20th, 2015, it was said that over 20,300 people signed a petition advocating for Cassandra's rights, and many even sent out a call to action. And on January 21st, there was even a rally hosted to protest for Cassandra. While there were 145 people signed up to attend a rally in support of Cassandra, just half a dozen showed up to the rally, cited likely as being due to the harsh winter conditions. But this rally happened just outside the CCMC with signs, posters, and the sentiment, "Cancer is not a crime." But despite the further attempts from supporters, her mother, and their legal team, Cassandra would remain at the hospital receiving chemotherapy for several more months. In March 2015, just 2 months after this trial, 7 months after her diagnosis, and around 5 months after the beginning of the mandatory chemotherapy, Cassandra's prognosis was fortunately much better. On March 11th, 2015, a CNN article was released stating that at the time of its posting, Cassandra was doing well and only had 2 more treatments to go. According to Joshua Mishtam, her attorney at the time, Cassandra was doing well and had not experienced too many aggressive side effects from the chemo. A statement from Joette Katz, the DCF commissioner, stated, quote, "We are very pleased with Cassandra's progress toward a complete recovery. We understand how difficult this has been for Cassandra and her family, but we have had full confidence throughout that the medical professionals involved in her treatment would be successful in saving her life." Now, although she was doing well physically in terms of the situation, her attorney stated that the situation with her being forced to remain in the hospital was effectively jail, as that was something she didn't want to have to do. Cassandra often spent her time in the hospital reading, drawing, and watching TV, and as her mission neared, she, by her own words via Facebook, was growing restless and was excited to leave. But unfortunately, things for her wouldn't play out quite as she hoped. CNN posted another article on April 2nd, 2015, stating that Cassandra was in remission but still in the hospital. Just that previous month, on March 16th, Cassandra's attorney tried to get her released from the hospital and into the custody of DCF, but was not successful. Though he cited that she was no longer at risk of harm from her illness, a judge ruled that Cassandra should remain with DCF at the CCMC. And from interviews, it seemed as if the visits to her in the hospital were limited. A Facebook post from a page dedicated to advocating for Cassandra's rights made a post on April 5th, 2015, sharing details of Cassandra going months without seeing her mother while in the hospital. The post reads, quote, "What a feeling to hold her and tell her I love her. She greeted me by running down the hallway, yelling, 'Mom,' with her arms wide open. I'm a lucky mom. This is a very special Easter Sunday. I love you bunches, sweetie." Cassandra's mom. A mother and daughter reunion on Easter Sunday. This is the first time Cassandra C has seen her mother since January. Can we all agree they look happy? Hashtag Free Cassandra. And this was posted on the same Facebook page, Free Cassandra, that was advocating for her rights. Cassandra would not be released from the hospital until later that month on April 27th. After her release from the hospital, Cassandra went on to share some more about her story and details of what she had been through since being forced to undergo chemotherapy. On July 13th, 2015, Cassandra sat down with a man named Ty Bollinger, who conducted an interview to ask her some questions about her experience with cancer and having to stay in the hospital to do chemo.
And they came in and they took me because they said that I had to get the chemo.
What do you mean they said that, when you say they took you?
They came into my house in October around Halloween and they said that I had to go with them.
And who is they?
The DCF workers.
Okay, the family, Division of Family and Child Services or whatever. DCF, okay. So they actually came into your home and took you from your...
Yeah, they had about 12 police squad cars surrounding my house and the block, and they basically just came into my house and said, we have to go. My mom wasn't even home. I was hiding in my closet upstairs because I had no idea what was going on. And
were you the only one at the house?
Yeah. I called my mom crying, and she came home immediately to police and DCF workers surrounding our house.
That's unbelievable.
And they said I had no choice but to go with them.
What were you feeling at that point with...
I was scared.
With your house surrounded?
Like, I had no idea what was going on, and I was scared, and I didn't understand why, because at the time I didn't know that I didn't have a choice.
Now, when I was doing my research, I saw that this interview had a watermark from a site named The Truth About Cancer, or TTAC. And as soon as I typed in Ty's name, I found out that this, in fact, was a site that he ran and actually seems to be quite popular. The thing is, one of the first things that popped up when researching was his Wikipedia page, and it says word for word, quote, Ty Bollinger is an American misinformation marketer and conspiracy theorist who promotes alternative medicine treatments for cancer and vaccine-preventable diseases. Bollinger has no medical training and has a history of disseminating misinformation about cancer treatments, anti-vaccine conspiracy theories, promoting ineffective or unproven cures, and other conspiracy theories on social media platforms. With his wife Charlene, he runs the website The Truth About Cancer and its associated social media accounts where they sell books, videos, and nutritional supplements based on these ideas. And they seem to be quite popular amongst this niche. Anyway, that's just a brief description on who Ty was, and on July 13th, Cassandra was interviewed by him in a video that was posted titled The Medical Kidnapping of Cassandra C. Finally, the Truth Revealed, The Truth About Cancer exclusive interview. This video has officially been removed from their pages online. However, there is a small clip I was able to find of it, which I'll be getting into a little bit later in this video. From that point on, after she was released from the hospital and had that interview, Cassandra mostly went back to a private life. She turned 18 on September 30th, 2015, and this was a relief to her since now she would never again have to risk having her rights violated based on her age. In fact, on December 3rd, 2015, Cassandra was given a $10,000 donation from The Truth About Cancer at their second annual charity gala in Nashville, Tennessee. In addition to this donation, she was also given and received some equipment and a year's supply of various products. And things did stay relatively quiet for her, unfortunately, until a year later when she found out some devastating news. In April 2016, Cassandra made a post on her personal Facebook account announcing that a CT scan showed a new cancerous growth was found in her lung. The post, which is now deleted or private, contained the following excerpt saying, quote, I've known about this for a while, but it's been hard going public with it. But this is why I fought so hard against chemotherapy. I am so sick of being treated like a number and how everything is based off of statistics. I am a patient, not a number. Unfortunately, I didn't make the 85%. I fell into the 15%. Her mention of the 85% was a reference to the chance of survival quoted to her in the beginning of her diagnosis, all the way back in 2014. Being 18 meant that Cassandra could finally make her own choice in regards to her medical treatment. And this time she chose to go with a more natural alternative route rather than going straight for chemotherapy. Updated from The Truth About Cancer's Facebook page on March 16th and again on August 2nd, stated that Cassandra allegedly moved to Cancun, Mexico to be treated by Tony and Marcy Jimenez at a clinic called the Hope for Cancer Institute. lawsuit. TTAC and Ty seem to have connections with this clinic, calling Tony and Marcy their very good friends, and they seemed to help Cassandra with sorting this out. This clinic seems to be relatively known in the alternative medicine world, but they're also notoriously known for using unproven or disproven methods of treatment for cancer. For example, they use coffee enemas, which is a method that hasn't been specifically or scientifically proven to help treat cancer. While they do seem to have many people who have shared their testimonies on their website, there are also a lot of people who have shared their negative experiences with the clinic. There's even a Facebook page which has over 1,100 members called Hope for Cancer Victims, with many people sharing their personal experiences with this clinic, many referring to the place as quackery or a scam. And according to a now closed GoFundMe page organized under Cassandra and titled Cassandra's Second Battle with Cancer, created on March 14th, 2017, it was said that throughout that next year, she did those alternative treatments by using things like cannabis oils. For the most part, it seems Cassandra initially was happy with her decision, and she even filmed 2 videos about her journey at Hope for Cancer, which were posted on Vimeo. However, throughout that period, Cassandra's condition in fact grew worse. And by January 2017, it was said that, quote, Cassandra discovered that now both of her lungs are full of masses along with her surrounding lungs, chest, surrounding heart, and neck. Cassandra now has to go through a very intensive 6 to 9 months of chemotherapy again in hopes that things clear up. So essentially, after a year of doing the alternative treatments and cannabis oils, the masses were growing even more in her lungs. And it was then when she decided to do not just the chemotherapy, but also do immunotherapy and other standard methods to treat it. Regardless, what mattered was that this time around, she had the choice to do whichever she felt the most comfortable with doing. According to the page, throughout that time, her health was not doing great. With the cancer being in her lungs especially, she was having difficulties with breathing and being able to partake in her daily activities. She also was unable to work, which made her struggle financially. Not too much after that is available online. However, something we do know about this period of time is that just that next year, Cassandra actually gave birth to 2 healthy sons in November 2018. These sons, named Jeremy and Braxton, were twins who were posted about on her personal Facebook. In early 2020, Cassandra was unfortunately doing incredibly poorly. Despite her attempts with alternative methods and with chemo, her cancer was becoming too much and continued worsening. Cassandra spent her last 4 months receiving hospice care from home. And on May 12, 2020, Cassandra passed away in her home at just 22 years old and in her mother's arms. She left behind her mother and 2 sons. Despite the coverage Cassandra's case got in the 2010s, due to a combination of her going private and the COVID-19 pandemic, her passing did not cause the shockwaves and discussions one would likely expect. But that's not to say that it was not discussed at all. A handful of local news sites published her story, and in the following year, a few academic articles would mention her case as well. The case of Cassandra Callender is definitely an upsetting one, but also one that is very important. And there was definitely a lot of controversy regarding the differing opinions on the case. It seems as though Cassandra was almost used as a poster child for those in the alternative medicine movement, while at the same time being an example for pro-Western medicine. Her getting in with Ty and TTAC was definitely her way of getting the connections she initially hoped for with alternative medicine. But then on the other hand, for the cancer to only get worse while undergoing the alternative methods, some looked at this, for a lack of a better term, but as a I told you so kind of situation, especially because there was a point when she realized that the alternative methods weren't working, which led her to decide to do the chemotherapy again. And even regarding Ty and TTAC, the 2 videos they posted of Cassandra have been scrapped from their page. And a blog post dated from June 5th, 2017 stated that it was even by then when the full video of Cassandra's interview had been just wiped from their page. Before she even passed away, the videos were removed from their page, and they've been pretty silent about the situation since she's passed. It seems as if they solely just used her as the testimony to promote their brand and products, but then not only was it that her cancer got worse even through the alternative treatments, but it was also the fact that she decided to then start doing chemotherapy afterwards. This was not a good look for their brand or the Hope for Cancer clinic. Which is weird though, because their page appears to be all about having the choice. Directly on the TTAC website, it says, quote, "And the truth is that we should all have the freedom to choose. Freedom to choose the best cancer treatment protocol, freedom to say yes or no to chemotherapy, freedom to try a treatment that hasn't been approved by the FDA, freedom to vaccinate, freedom not to vaccinate. We will never stop fighting to protect our health. Freedom." So they say this, but then in the same breath, wipe Cassandra's video from their page when she used her freedom to choose chemotherapy. I saw a lot of rhetoric online of people saying, see, the chemo didn't work. She got cancer again. The same way, there are obviously people saying, see, the alternative treatment methods didn't work. But I think what people need to realize is that at the end of the day, no treatment method offers 100% survival. There's no guarantee that you will survive through any treatment. Obviously, there's the percentages people throw out, and for the most part, there are cancers that have a better chance of being treatable. Regardless, that doesn't guarantee that you will survive with doing chemo. A lot of things, unfortunately, weren't in Cassandra's favor. Having a delay in doing treatment definitely isn't something that is helpful for one's prognosis. Hodgkin's lymphoma is one of those cancers that can progress quickly without treatment. So for a better outcome, it is best if one does treatment as soon as possible for it. Dealing with issues like death and bodily autonomy is rarely simple, but the overall discussion and controversy around Cassandra's case are what makes it hard to form thoughts about it. There are so many different factors that played a role in the case, and there are many things that you could agree with about the case while simultaneously disagreeing with too. On the side of Cassandra, having your right to determine what is best for you and have your body surgically manipulated is horrible. To have a medical device forcefully implanted into your chest to introduce medicines that you do not consent to having in your body is beyond a technical ethics issue. It's a personal violation. For example, Cassandra was, according to the very same state, old enough to own and maneuver a motor vehicle, among many other things. To trust a teenager with the safety of their lives and the lives of others on the road, then deny that maturity when it comes to a medical choice is outrageous. That being said, I understand how and why the court came to the conclusion that it did. The court saw a mother who was avoidant of doctors and Western medicine in general. They saw a mother who had homeschooled her child for many years and likely did not adequately teach her about biology or anatomy. They saw a mother who lied to doctors and eventually the court itself about her interest in getting Cassandra treated for her life-threatening condition. When they added up all of these factors, they ultimately came to the conclusion that they needed to do something about it. It just is particularly hard thinking about this, especially because she was turning 18 so soon, and it was only then when she was allowed to make choices for her body. The thing is, what difference was it a few months prior before her 18th birthday? How was it that now she's mature enough but wasn't a few months ago? What determines someone's maturity in consenting to a medical procedure, especially in that gray area between being a teenager and a legal adult? Shortly after Cassandra's passing, Jackie began speaking to news outlets covering the case, and she opened a GoFundMe to help cover costs for her funeral and court fees from the past years. In the GoFundMe, Jackie said, quote, "As some know, my daughter passed away Tuesday, May 12, 2020 at home in my arms. She lost her battle with cancer after 5 years of treatment that did not work. She tried, she was strong, tough, and went through so much as such a young person. My heart hurts. I'm crushed. Cassandra was my only child and precious she was. After all she has been through, beat up, strapped down, forced chemo, etc., then to lose her life so young, she deserves more. But I was lucky enough to have her in my arms and tell her I loved her as she took her last breath." The GoFundMe only reached around $5,000 of the asked $20,000, but has remained up for viewing. Jackie also stated to several media outlets, quote, "I raised her to be a fighter, and that's what she was," Fortin said. "She went through hell. She never had a life. She never had a chance. I hold every doctor and nurse who touched her DCF, the courts, I hold everyone responsible. Jackie still runs Cassandra's Facebook page as a memorial to her daughter. Pictures of Cassandra and content regarding her sons are some of the only content that remains on the profile. The page still seems to be active, as since filming this, it was recently updated as of May 12, 2024. Despite several calls for change from Jackie and from some of those who followed the story as it unfolded, the laws regarding minors' rights to their medical autonomy remain unchanged. Specifically discussed in much of the court and other related documentation is a mature minor doctrine, and this is a clause in several states that suggests that certain minors are completely capable of handling several important choices on their own. These choices could be regarding their health, safety, or other aspects of their lives that would typically be decided upon by a parent, guardian, or court. And this doctrine is used in tandem with evidence relating to each individual case. This doctrine is not featured within Connecticut laws and has not been formally adopted, nor has anything similar. They instead focus it on a case-by-case basis without the outline of a doctrine. No motions have been put in place to change the already standing laws, nor add any new bits as of the time of filming this video. In terms of minors deciding against chemo, there are two main cases that seem to be relatively known, and these are the cases of Billy Best and Abraham Starchild Chirix. In the case of Billy Best, he decided that he did not want chemotherapy to treat the cancer he had, and what he instead did was focus on alternative treatment options. Billy had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma as a teenager, and like Cassandra, he ran away to avoid chemo. But unlike Cassandra, he was actually successful in doing so. He never received chemo and was not taken to court upon coming home. And as of 2012, Billy was alive and well and aged 33. As for Abraham, his case was much more similar to Cassandra's. At age 15, he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, cancer, and began chemotherapy. Abraham was 16 years old in 2006 when he was taken to court in Virginia, where his parents were accused of neglect. After a round or two of chemotherapy, Abraham decided that he wanted to try something else, and his parents supported this and helped him seek alternative treatments in Mexico. During the court case, Abraham explained that he'd wanted to stop chemo and that his parents were only supporting him in doing so, not neglecting his health. After a successful trial, Abraham was allowed to choose his own treatment plan despite his age. In 2007, a new law titled Abraham's Law was enacted in Virginia's legislature, amending a code that was already standing. This amendment allowed adolescents aged 14 to 17 with life-threatening conditions to make their own choices, so long as they've considered all options and their parents agree. These are just two cases of many that are similar to the situation Cassandra was in. Now, there are many different sides to look at when trying to form a clear-cut opinion about this case, like we discussed. Overall, though, I think Cassandra should have had the right to opt out of treating the cancer with chemotherapy if she wished to. Now, if the situation had been that her mother was solely restricting her healthcare access, that of course would have been a different story. However, there were several accounts of Cassandra herself stating she did not want to have chemotherapy. I think as long as the doctors, the healthcare professionals, the hospital, the state thoroughly informed her about chemotherapy, the risks of doing it, the risks of not doing it, then they really did what they really could do. I do understand that there is a possibility that she was not as informed as she likely could have been. I just think as long as they made their best possible effort to educate her on the treatments, that's all they really should have left it at, instead of making her get this treatment that she didn't want. Now, it's iffy because there are a lot of factors that could have played a major role on her thoughts towards chemotherapy. Just looking at her mother's views and how close she relied on her mother emotionally, there is a good chance she might not have been as informed as she could have been, even with the information from the healthcare professionals, especially after the fact that Ty and The Truth About Cancer took her under their wing. If you ask my opinion, I personally think she should have gotten the chemotherapy. I know when I was diagnosed with leukemia, I immediately knew I was going to do chemo, no questions asked. I just think the difference obviously could have been the fact that I did thoroughly understand why chemo would have been the best option for me. I was 20, not 17, so maybe I could have been more mature. And I also didn't have a prominent figure in my life who was against Western medicine or chemotherapy who could have influenced my thoughts. But regardless, even though I personally think she should have gotten the chemo, I respect that that isn't what she wanted. The laws around the medical independence of teens in Connecticut remains unchanged. However, it seems that there haven't been other cases like Cassandra's in recent years. Cassandra would have been 27 this year, and it's upsetting thinking about the struggles she endured during her last few years of life. Hopefully, further legislation like the ones lined out in Virginia's Abraham's Law will be introduced at some point, affording young people more legal rights to their own bodily autonomy. But yes, that is it for today's case. This one really gets you thinking because there are so many factors that played a role in this case, and it's very easy to reason with each opinion. What are your thoughts on this case? Please comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any other videos on medical cases, crime, and mystery. Bye now.